The Democrats, their main talking point now is going to be crime, ironically, because they tend to be the soft on crime, defund the police party. They're realizing after what happened to Lori Lightfoot in Chicago that that's not a winning proposition. They're trying to switch the narrative on this. Democrats now are actually changing the narrative on violence. They're changing the narratives on crime. They're changing all these things, right? And again, Lori Lightfoot and her really, she got pushed out, is basically the shot over the bow that their current stance on crime and their current policies are going to lose them elections, including in very Democrat, very blue Chicago, right? If Lori Lightfoot could lose there, what does it mean for Democrats across the country? That's the concern right now. They're finding now that their narrative, their issue, and this has been a major issue for them, is not working, and they're beginning to change it. Biden is currently getting thrown under the bus for this. And let me show you this. NBC News actually has a story, and they say, Biden bucks liberals and tells Democrats to get tough on crime. You could argue this is Biden's old school stance because he was the tough on crime politician. He was the guy who helped make this 3-strike rule. He was the guy who helped make it so that marijuana users get thrown in prison for very long periods of time. This was his issue. And it's interesting now that he's shifting back towards that. It says President Joe Biden's decision Thursday on a local crime law sends a national message to fellow Democrats on how he believes they should address Republican criticism of the nation's rising crime rates. It says Democrats have focused predominantly on police reform since George Floyd's protests reignited a national debate over race and law enforcement 3 years ago. But rising violent crime rates and growing perceptions of unease in major cities, Seattle, for example, is actually getting rid of their defund the police policies, one example of this. It says that rising crimes on this, right, have prompted a chorus of party strategists, meaning Democrat Party strategists, advising them on what is working and what's not on their policies, and officials to call for a tougher approach to counter Republican attacks. It says Biden, who has a history of pushing stauncher crime laws, which he does, has tried to straddle the Democrat divide, but was forced this week to choose sides when he said he would not allow the Washington, D.C. city government to enact laws that would lower some criminal penalties. He says, this is Democrat strategist Lee Smith, if Republicans thought President Biden would hand them a wedge issue for 2024, they were wrong, which is a very bizarre statement. Basically, they're doing this in an odd way. They're saying the quiet part out loud. The Democrat strategists, Biden and so on, they're making it clear that they're basically reversing their soft on crime approach, not because they're actually, not because they actually want to get hard on crime, not because they care about safety and the physical, well-being of the American public, but because they believe that their soft on crime approach is becoming a danger to their grasp on politics. One political strategy, and this is not necessarily a Democrat strategy or a Republican strategy, but a political strategy in general. You often see this ironically with communist countries. They like to have a fall guy. That the entire party can be behind certain political narratives. And if those political narratives lead to destruction, they then are faced with two choices. Do you continue on that path and possibly destroy yourselves politically? Or do you make a fall guy? Do you have the head of that movement basically get destroyed, taken down, retired, forced out of office, or whatever else, in order to protect the people behind him, who can then come out and say, I disagreed with him from the beginning. That was all him. That wasn't communism. That was Stalinism. That wasn't communism. That was Maoism. That wasn't communism. That was Leninism. It was the guy, not the system. It was the politician, not the policy. He just did it wrong. We're going to do it right. He didn't know what he was doing. I do. Vote for me and I'll change everything. Right? That's the way that type of political strategy works. And it looks right now like they could, and they're trying to, it looks like, push Biden out and say the bad things that happened, he just didn't do it right, he has issues, he's not feeling so well. But he just didn't apply it right. The problem was not the policies, it was how it was implemented, and we are going to do it right. We know what he did wrong, and we're going to fix it. And that's how the criticism game is going to work, to wipe their hands clean of Biden's legacy and say, we are different. That's the political trajectory right now for the Democrats. Political Insider has a story that says liberals freak out after New York City Mayor Eric Adams says guns came into the schools when prayer was taken out. Aside from even him talking about guns, coming into schools when prayer was taken out, even now on some of the mainstream news outlets, the video channels, right, like the NBCs and so on, and the CNNs, they're starting to use these as talking points. They're starting to start debate. And when you're dealing with a lot of these corporate media, a lot of these politically entrenched media, a lot of times what they're doing is they basically work as almost like super PACs. They represent certain political parties and certain political narratives, and usually the narrative they push is in fact part of the agenda of the party they represent. When they start talking about soft on crime and begin trying to distance themselves from Biden's legacy, the way I view it at least, is that this is them trying to pivot the debate. This is them making the new stance of the party. And what they're saying with Eric Adams right now is, hey, are you becoming tough on crime? What are the Republicans doing wrong? And so on. They're moving along with the same narrative. But let me show you what Eric Adams, interestingly, in New York, mayor of New York, is even saying about prayer and school violence. Let me show you this.
If we are bringing our best fight in the ring, we would not have homeless in this city. We would not have a crisis of domestic violence. We would not have children, because when we took prayers out of schools, guns came into schools.
Now remember, a lot of this stuff's calculated. He's wearing a purple tie. He's not a blue tie. It's the bringing together of both sides, right? It's not blue like the Democrats. It's not red like the Republicans. It's purple. He's talking about unity, folks. Right? That's the narrative now. Right? That's the narrative now. And the Democrats you're starting to see are starting to pivot their narrative towards the Republican narrative, right? On crime, on religion. What does that tell you? That tells me, in my opinion, that the Democrats believe that their policies are going to lead to them failing. The policies that they were representing for a long time were not going to lead to their victory in 2024. And so they need to pivot themselves politically on their talking points and their public messaging and even on their policies. And they're adopting the Republican stance, which tells you what? They believe the Republican stance is what will allow them to win elections, which means they believe the Republicans have a shot at winning the elections to the point where they need to pivot away from their policies and towards them.